As I sit on my porch in the darkness of this Alaskan night, I'm now telling you what happened about 10 years ago, around the time I had my firstborn. My wife and I had just moved to the East Coast and I was having trouble finding work. But I tell you what, when I looked into the wet, shining eyes of that child, I imagined a future where I wouldn't have to say no, where I wouldn't have to explain why we lived differently than the other half. She wasn't going to grow up wanting the way I did. And when I looked into that child's eyes, I would see a series of images, as if a movie played back before my eyes of a future gilded with splendor, a life of great peace and serenity, full of love and beauty. That child was destined to change the fate of humanity, to show us a better way, to take on our suffering and unite us all in these times of great strife. Let me tell you, I wasn't going to be out of work very long. I drifted from the back end of restaurant to restaurant looking for more hours, fighting for every dime of higher pay, scrubbing pots and pans till well past midnight when my fingers were worn raw to the bone. It was a real struggle for a couple of months. Finding cheap rent wasn't easy back then, and I hear it's only gotten harder since. But to make a long story short, eventually I happened upon a flyer in the alleyway out back when I was taking a smoke break. It read, "Find adventure. See the coast on the Ace in the Ocean fishing boat. Now hiring." Now, when I saw that, I thought to myself, I sure don't know much about boats or running a fishing boat, but I do love to fish. It'd been a hobby of mine since I was a kid. Oh, hell with it, I thought. Worst they can do is turn me down, and the next day will come and go just like all those days previous. Give me plenty of time to look for something better. I was an optimist back then. This wrinkled cynicism you now see engraved in my expression, ne'er was there a trace of it back then. You see, I used to fancy myself a man of determination, of grit, a man who'd stop at nothing to get what he was after. I was going to take the world by storm if need be, but I'd have it. Now, if you knew me now, you'd probably scratch your head and wonder, just what in the hell is this hillbilly bumpkin talking about? Fair enough. I haven't been the most driven in life, but a lot's changed since then. Lots changed. Perhaps I'm just older and wiser, or perhaps I lost that spark of fierce ambition, or maybe I never had it at all. But, in a way, back then I think it was the only rope I had to grab onto, to keep me from tumbling into some kind of abyss. To fancy myself that sort of adventurous and brave alpha type, well, it made up for all my personal deficiencies. In the face of my actual mediocrity, it was my potential to be something great. You see? So given these considerations, naturally I kept that flyer, maybe for a week before I finally got up the gumption, or else shed the inertia of my laziness to give that number a call. It was supposedly the owner who answered the call. He seemed friendly enough. He asked if I'd be willing to come down for an interview, but after we'd agreed and ended the call, within hours the phone rang again. It was someone else who picked up this time, saying I had the job, and could I start right away. It was that night I quit the restaurant business forever, and without 2 weeks' notice. I told you I was full of hopes and dreams back then, that I believed a fast rise in this world to be inevitable, didn't I? The night before my first day on the boat, I can remember staying up all night with the baby. I didn't sleep a wink. I was mentally preparing myself for what laid ahead. I'd heard that fishing boats could be an intense work environment, that if you weren't fast on the take, that if you screwed up more than once or twice, they'd send you packing pretty quickly as a known liability. Given that, failing to get any rest before the first day was probably not the best idea. But I couldn't help it. I just kept staring into that little girl's sparkling eyes, thinking, this is the first day of our future. This is the first day of the rest of our lives. Of all the great things in store for you, little girl, once Daddy scratches some dough together, nothing will stop us from rising to the top like the cream. When I arrived at the dock and asked the security which lot I should head to for the ace of the ocean, it was early in the morning, just after sunrise, and a fog hung over the waters. As I approached the lot, I found a medium-sized engine-powered fishing boat that also had sails and men nets hanging over the sides. I read the name printed in large italic letters, the Ace of the Ocean, on the side. There was a large board leading from the dock onto the boat, and I hesitated, thinking I should perhaps ask permission to come aboard or something like that. Guess I'd watched too many movies or something. But seeing no one in the immediate vicinity, I ventured. Hello? Anyone home? Seeking permission to come aboard. It wasn't long before a scrawny white kid with a man bun, holey jeans, and an open flannel shirt with long johns underneath came from below deck. Hey man, how's it going? You must be the new guy. Yes, I answered. I just got the job the other day ago. They told me to come by today. All right, very cool. Come on over, I'll show you the ropes. As I crossed the plank and stepped aboard, the man offered his hand. By the way, I'm Kyle. Nice to meet you. I shook his hand and gave my own name in return. As we walked towards the bow of the boat, I began to question my new mentor. So, you captain this ship all by yourself? He looked at me and laughed derisively. Man, you must really be a noob to this stuff, he said. No, I can't run this ship by myself. I'm really more of a cabin boy. You know, this isn't a labor of love for me. When I put some money together, and I mean, when I put some serious scratch together, I'm going back to school, my man, to finish my degree. In the meantime, I'm just trying to keep my head down, enjoy the chaos of the job, and do as little work as possible. Don't worry, I'll teach you all my tricks. So where are the other workers? I ventured casually. Well, he says, it's just Reg and Dom. They're below deck, pre-gaming. Pre-gaming, I says. Yeah, you know, doing a few shots to take the edge off. It's just their morning ritual to come in early, prep the boat, and sit down there and play cards and bullshit until it's time to take off. Doesn't the boss get pissed they're drinking, I asked? After I said this, I felt a bit as if I might be coming off as kind of like a Catholic schoolboy or something. And I noted that when I met the other two, I should do my best not to come off as some kind of judgmental snitch or something like that. Despite the fact that I was there for one thing and one thing only. To actually bust my ass and make the most of this opportunity I'd been given by the graces of God himself, alone. Oh, hell no, Kyle blurted out, as if he were truly surprised at my level of naivete. The owner never comes down here, first of all. Secondly, he's pretty much a drunk himself. Partying like on the daily, bro. You know? Don't complain about the mote in thy brother's eye when there's a beam in thine own. You know? And he doesn't complain. You know? He's got millions. He's the kind of guy takes baths in gold coins. Like Scrooge McDuck, man. Wow, was all I could mutter. I stood truly nonplussed. I truly wasn't expecting the revelation. And he bought this little fishing boat for, I ventured. Don't be fooled, Kyle spoke now with the look of a wise sage on his face. The fishing boat is just a cover. The real purpose of this here vessel is for the owner to bring his rich friends out and party. You'll see. Happens a few times a month. They have us all bring them out into international waters. We'll help reel in the big ones they coked out and wasted finance bros and tech bros can't reel in. I don't know that the actual day to do business is even profitable. You'll see. You'll have some douche wearing $1,000 boat shoes spit in your face before long. But you'll take it. You'll keep your mouth shut, and you'll come back the next day. The money is just too good. I see, I said to him. Well, thanks for filling me in, friend. I spoke with what must have been a somewhat disheartened tone. Here I had been secretly imagining real adventures on the high seas, where I was now being told that I would be a glorified waiter, a glorified water boy on a party boat for millionaires. After giving me a cursory look around on deck, Kyle shouted down the hatch. Yo, Reg, the new guy's up here. His tone of voice had decidedly changed. After a few moments, I saw two black men appear on deck. Both of them large-framed, absolutely ripped guys who wore faded cut-off t-shirts. I could tell both guys were heavily into bodybuilding. Reg was the taller of the two, standing at about 6'6", while Dom was about 6'1", I would say. The two so resembled one another that Dom was looking kind of like a younger brother to the former. I introduced myself and shook hands with both of them. Neither seemed as excited to see me as Kyle had been, but instead gave off an impression of being all business. This sort of impressed me, after all. After a few short introductory comments, Reggie took me to the side and began giving me a spiel. Look, man, I know you're new to all this, but Dan's got high hopes for you, player. I should mention that Reggie was in the habit of calling everyone, every guy he ever met, player. I responded, Dan? Is that the owner's name? Hell yeah, man. You saying you didn't speak to the owner? No, I did. I guess he just didn't give his name out, and I forgot to ask for it. Yeah, I got you. Sounds like Dan. So, Kyle was telling me this guy is like a millionaire or something like that. You could say that, player. Reality is, he's a card player. See the name on the boat? A card player, I asked? Yeah, means poker, man. He's made millions. Telling you, this guy is legendary. Word is he won $50 million off one guy in a game. Has had many other similar wins. Dude is loaded and all on his poker face. All I can say is, if you ever get invited to one of his private games, and I have been myself, just watch your ass. The world's most powerful people in attendance. You don't want to fuck with the wrong guy. You feel me, player? Wow. 50 million? Man, that's extraordinary. This guy sounds like some kind of eccentric. He's weird, all right. You'll meet the bearded bastard soon enough. Enough talk. Screw him. I gotta show you the way here, player. You feel me? Why are you here anyway? You think this is gonna be a cakewalk or something? No, Reggie, not at all. Only reason I'm here, well, it's for my daughter, man. Making a better future. He looked me straight in the eyes. I can respect that, man. I'll help you out. So let me tell you one thing. Don't get on Dan's bad side. That means he says jump, you say how high. That means you don't know shit, player. You don't question, you don't advise, you don't object, you just do. If you can't handle that, I think you'll get along just fine around here, man. And if you can't, if you're one of those suckers like Kyle thinks he knows better than everyone, you might as well beat it right now. What do you mean? I asked him. Kyle's on Dan's bad side? Man, screw Kyle. He's like a little college sorority girl trying to be a man. Of course nobody likes him. You feel me, player? Don't be like Kyle. You understand that? You'll do just fine around me. Now, as you could probably guess about me, I took in everything I was being told. My mind was racing in an attempt to process all the information and calculate what my every move should be to get along in a manner that benefited me in this enterprise. When Don finally came up to the deck, they taught me how to steer the boat, the simple rules of navigation. They taught me how to throw anchor and basics of deep-sea fishing, which I had never done before. The day passed by in a flurry of activity and ball breaking. Even thought it was only my first day. I'd begun to feel a sense of camaraderie, can you believe it? With this seemingly small gang of lost souls, like the island of lost toys or something. We were all folks who'd been thrown away in some sense, but who'd found a way to survive and even thrive on this endeavor via the boon of some strange reclusive millionaire whom it seemed only Reg had ever met in person. Despite all the red flags, I was intrigued, dangerously intrigued, horribly intrigued, terrifyingly intrigued, and the money would be good, too good. I just couldn't say no. And so, days and then weeks passed, most uneventfully, as I struggled to get my feet under me on the boat. I'd come to understand the roles that each of these men played on the boat. Reg, the wise leader, Dom, the fierce hothead, Kyle, the comedic relief. What would be my role, I often thought. I had many a night wondered. After all, to me, at the time, this was only a halfway house, a rest stop on the voyage to my greater purpose. Despite the fact that I longed for greater things, I couldn't help but get swept up into the adventure of the present endeavor. The danger and the brotherhood involved with being stuck on a small vessel in the middle of shark-infested waters with 3 other guys. Over the course of 4 months, on the boat, I'd impatiently waited for signs of the time that our true purpose on that vessel would become apparent, to host the booze-fooled parties of the mysterious owner. But such a day was slow to come, and instead, something even more interesting happened first. And on that day, the day that would change all the rest of my days from then until the present, it was a Friday. It started out like any other Friday. I'd woken up early, helped my wife tend to the baby, kissed them both adieu, and headed out to the docks, But when I had arrived, something unusual was occurring. There was a flurry of activity occurring on dock as Reg, Dom, and Kyle worked synchronously to get the boat ready to undock. As I hopped aboard, escaping the notice of anyone except Kyle, who had become a sort of confidant of mine in all of this dynamic change to my old lifestyle, on noticing me in what was likely my perplexed expression, Kyle sauntered up to me with an excited grin on his face. "What's going on, bud?" I ventured. He replied with a tone that attempted to mask his own overwhelming excitement. "Oh, just a treasure hunt. Sunken chests full of gold doubloons and all that. Standard protocol, my friend. You know?" "What?" I exclaimed. Fortunately, by then Reg had noticed I was standing off to the side, being completely unhelpful to the cause, and had quickly walked up to rectify the situation. I spoke first, even if out of turn. "What's this Kyle's blabbering about a sunken treasure chest?" Reg eyed Kyle with an annoyed expression. "Don't listen to him, man. Dan knows the guy at his poker games. Used to do this kind of archaeology stuff on old sunken ships. Give him a lead Dan wants us to check out. It's just a lead, man. That's all it is. Nothing more than a lead. But Dan has a good feeling about it. It's in an area not too deep for us. We'll sort it out for Dan. Easy day overall. Okay, player? Know what I mean? The ace of the ocean might just be famous after today. If all goes well, we might have a seat at the card table. You feel me, player?" "Well, interesting," was all I could muster before Reg ran off as quickly as he'd come, resuming his activities as the acting captain of the boat. Though I didn't get the chance to tell Reg, I felt him. Lord knows I certainly did. After about an hour of fervent and giddy activity, in which we'd all fallen into place like a well-oiled machine, it was finally time to take off. Reg had proclaimed that it'd take us the better part of the day to get to the coordinates we'd been ordered to dust up. Dom had wrangled up the diving gear we would need. 2 guys had been slated to go down beneath the swell. Not wanting to leave both Kyle and I alone on deck, the 2 had concurred that Dom should go down with one of us. While we were both bleeding to be the one to go down, we'd been told that we'd flip a coin once we were anchored at the coordinates. Reg understood that for guys like Kyle and I, this could be huge. For our overall bragging rights and self-esteem, that is. Discovering buried treasure would be a unique story we'd be able to play and replay for the better part of the rest of our lives. Or so Reg had thought. We sailed for what seemed like hours that morning. Though I'd gained some rudimentary knowledge, I wasn't much involved with the activities of navigation at the time. But as the morning had passed and the afternoon with the sun burning directly overhead to the evening with the sun setting on the horizon, and we still hadn't reached our coordinates, I'd begun to worry a bit. If staring out at the infinite horizon hadn't made me nervous enough, staring out at the fathomless starry sky certainly did the trick. I began to fancy myself, years from now, sitting out on the ocean with my daughter, regaling the tales from long ago, the treasure hunt that had made her father his fortune and his fame, the beauteous bounty, the wave on which that our family had risen from the gutter on. At that point, I wouldn't have turned back for the world. It was only later that the wisdom would come to that wide-eyed young man, and as always, it would come too late. The storm came in fast, faster than the wings of Hermes, as they say. It wasn't pretty. It was on us before we could react. If nature was testing us, we failed that test miserably. Before I knew what was happening, I witnessed Dom sliding across the rain-soaked deck in a flurry of arms and legs as he attempted to take the sails down. The wind was blowing the raindrops in sideways at such a speed they felt as if they were cutting at the face and the cheeks. There was only one small lurch of the ship before Dom was somersaulting through the air and slamming his head hard against some of the metal pulleys of the rigging. Reg was there in an instant, ordering Kyle to the bow in expectation he'd somehow be capable of steering the ship through these treacherous peaks and valleys of a mountainous waves which threatened to tear the ship into pieces at the first mismatch of frequencies. Reg was fast, though. The next moment, I saw him disappearing below deck, dragging down by the torso. The last I saw of the pair was Dom's sneakers as they bounced along the stairs and disappeared into the darkness below. Not knowing where my skills could best serve, I quickly ran to the bow, only to find Kyle lying in a pile of his own blood, which had also painted the steering wheel red. It was only a moment of confusion before I realized he had been caught unawares by the steering wheel, jerking with the tumultuous movements of the ship, and had been knocked unconscious on the spot. I quickly grabbed the wheel as the momentous spray of the crashing waves hit upon the decks again, nearly carrying Kyle's limp body overboard with it as I clutched madly to the wheel in front of me. I don't remember much else of the experience, other than the only thing I could see clearly was the full spherical moon above beaming down over us in that vast ocean desert. The next thing I knew, the ship was careening forward, not on a wave per se, but straight down somehow, as if we'd just gone over a cliff. At first, I closed my eyes, thinking we were dead, that we'd gone over a waterfall, that we'd smashed to pieces on the rocks below any instant. But then, realizing that, we were still in the ocean, and that such a thing was a sheer impossibility, I opened my eyes. What I saw nearly caused my heart to stop beating. At first, it seemed as if it was just darkness. But it slowly dawned on me that darkness was rushing past my face at an unthinkable speed. When I looked straight above, I saw the same moon and the stars spinning in an impossible pattern. It was then I realized that we were spinning into some kind of massive whirlpool, one that by the looks of it was miles wide, that we were going down into a maelstrom. As the ship tipped vertically, just like in that movie, The Titanic, I lurched forward, smashing my own face into the steering wheel. After that, well, everything went dark. When I finally awoke, my head was splitting. I moved cautiously, but my face felt sticky and somehow stuck in its place. As some kind of nausea welled up in my guts, I heard what felt like distant voices speaking, being carried to my ears as if from far, far away. Then there was a splash. Cold liquid drenched my face, filling my nasal and throat passages, and I immediately came up on all fours, coughing and spitting. When I opened my eyes, I saw a puddle of blood directly beneath my face. Despite the fact that my whole being was decidedly numb, other than my splitting headache, it was clear that I must have sliced my forehead open pretty badly in the collision. When I came to my senses after some stumbling, I found the rest of the crew gathered round the stern.
Presently, when I looked around, I found that we were floating backwards down some kind of channel, with nothing but strange-looking trees on either shore. As I made my way up towards the crew, nursing my pounding head in both hands, I heard them speak in low, hushed tones. If we're gonna do it, we gotta do this quick. It was Reg that spoke this time. Now I'll be the first to admit it. We messed up. In our rush to get out there to the coordinates, we forgot to fill the gas cans for the generator and the engine. Would have been fine if shit didn't go down like this, but it did. So when I turned that generator on, we're only gonna have a few seconds to get that old radio up and running. Ours is smashed. That antique is the only lifeline we have, but it's got no batteries. So Dom, you're the best operator we got. I'm gonna have you put the signal out when we... It was then that Kyle spoke up, cutting Reg off. Previous to now, he'd been staring dreamily off at the shore as if he were lost in thought. Slight confession, gents. I already tried the generator while y'all were out. It's done for, boys. Won't even crank. It's like it's all seized up or something. What the hell, Kyle? You know you ain't authorized to touch shit on this vessel. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, boys. It's just I was awfully, well... You know, I thought we were up shit's creek, so I thought I was helping out or something, you know? That's not the worst of it. Engine won't start either. What? What? Red shoved Kyle back a few steps and took off under the deck, slamming the port door behind him. I'm telling you guys, Kyle spoke quietly now. Looks like we're screwed, boys. I'm sorry, I don't know what else to say. I spoke up now. I don't mean to butt in, guys, but what in the hell happened last night? Dom lowered his eyes at me, glowering before simply shrugging his shoulders, turning and walking towards the bow. I sat waiting for Kyle to speak, but he merely leaned against the railings of the stern, staring off at the shore as, indeed, he had before.
Now, the thought occurred to me that we might all be concussed, currently experiencing some impact trauma-induced hallucinations, or something of the sort. But as we continued to drift, the reality of the situation hit home. We were stuck, truly stranded, adrift somehow in this alien channel, when hours previous we had been rising and falling on the massive waves of the storm. Now, drifting along some kind of calm and peaceful tributary, with nothing but rows of pine on either shore. We drifted in this manner for many hours. It may have been days for all I know. For the other odd point was that night never seemed to fall at all at this time. Now we couldn't see the sun, or any source of light. The sky seemed a dull shade of impenetrable gray, the typical diffuse texture of clouds and such full absent. Just that diffuse gray color illuminating the land with some obscure source of light, in a cycle of darkness which never came until later. Now it may have been just a few days, or it could have been as much as a week, but eventually we saw some sign of civilization. I was messing around with an old antique spyglass from below deck when I spotted something unusual beyond the bend we currently floated through. It looked like some kind of a wooden docking extending far out into the channel. My heart must have skipped a beat as I jumped up and quickly riled up the rest of the crew, who had before that time been listlessly tending to their injuries and generally flirting with the idea of jumping off the boat and swimming ashore. taking our chances in whatever wilds we currently traversed. But now, everyone gathered around me at the stern. I remind you, the boat was floating decidedly backwards down the channel, and stared off at the docks as it grew larger and larger in perspective as we approached. Though there was a slight fog hanging over the waters, it gradually dawned on us that we were not alone in this locale. A man of some stature seemingly stood on the dock, his silhouette alone being the first harbinger of his most esteemed presence. As we drifted closer, we witnessed the silhouette waving to us, much to our surprise. I'm sure we'd all been thinking this could merely be a mirage up until that point. As we grew closer and the fog thinned, we observed a tall, rotund man standing aboard the docks. Reg and Dom had steered us close enough that I thought there might be a collision with the docks as the anchor was tossed down and we came to a rest within jumping distance, thanks much to their skill. We all quickly leaned over the railings of the stern to get a better look at the man who greeted us. As I said, he was tall, probably 7 feet tall, with an enormous girth. He wore extremely greasy-looking garments. His pants were pinstriped, red and purple. His brownish-looking button-up shirt had once upon a time been yellow. His dark, stained purple blazer, which he wore over top, looked ancient and worn. He wore a massive beard and beady, blackish eyes. A large purple top hat, probably over a foot tall, crowned his head, upon which he wore long, curly, and twisted oily locks, which seemed full of dirt and debris of some kind. He spoke first. "Welcome. Welcome all ye to the greatest show in the universe." It only then dawned on us that he was a strange barker of some kind, attempting to attract guests to some sort of show. As he continued, the fog behind him suddenly thinned, revealing massive gates, various red and white striped tents, and great mechanical machines that resembled Ferris wheels and other carnival rides. "The Carnival of the Echoes is at your service, me lads. Come ashore. Spend your dime and your pieces of 8. Here you will not be disappointed. Scenes beyond your wildest recognition lie inside. Once you come in, you'll never want to leave." Reggie spoke first. "Hey man, we're lost. We got caught up in the storm, turned around. Where the hell we at?" I couldn't tell if the man had heard Reg or not, but he merely replied, "Welcome to the greatest show in the universe." This time, Dom spoke up. "Hey man, we really hungry. You know if these here waters got fish?" "Hungry?" the man yelled out in a booming expression. "Why, come ashore. Gents such as yourselves should not be going without. You'll find plenty of grub beyond the gates." "Nah, man, we're fishermen. We're gonna catch something ourselves, thanks." "Well, if it's the catch of the day you're after, beyond yonder tree line you'll find a pond with bounteous plenty." "We're talking potable water?" Dom shouted back at the figure, to which he only replied, "Welcome to the greatest show in the universe." "Now who the hell are you?" Reggie now spoke up again, asserting dominance in the exchange. "Why," the man boomed back, his face partly shrouded with the flowing fog, "they call me Mr. Jekyll. I'm the most highly regarded representative of this here carnival. I tell ye, ye won't be disappointed at the fun that awaits within these walls." "Man, to hell with this, let's go," Reg spoke, with an urgency to his voice. He had been limiting everyone's rations since our first arrival in this place. I could tell that while he knew it was the right thing, secretly it had been killing him to have to be the one to make these decisions for everyone. Reg and Dom quickly ran about gathering up the fishing gear, some empty water carboys, and some other supplies. We then all took turns making the leap over about 3 to 4 feet of murky waters onto the docks. As I jumped and soared through the open air in front of me, it was the first time I became aware of how thick and impenetrable was the appearance of these waters. Kyle was the last to jump. His landing was slightly off, and he nearly fell backwards before Reg grabbed him by the collar and pulled him safely onto the docks. I could tell that something was still slightly off about Kyle, as if he still hadn't fully recovered from that blow to the head from earlier. We approached the man on the docks as if he might be a threat, ever cautiously. As we approached him, the horrid stench of rotting dead fish overwhelmed our senses. He clearly towered above us all, but he stood perfectly stock still as we passed him. "Joyous day," he proclaimed in the same booming voice. "Bless ye all. Abandon that curse called hope as you go. Enter yonder." Reg had decided that he and Dom would search for the pond and gather food and water for the remainder of the journey, while it was up to Kyla and I to look for phones, radios, or any other form of communication at this mysterious carnival that stood looming in the fog in front of us. When it came time to split, Reg gave us a serious look. "Now, remember, no messing around. In and out. Meet us back here within the hour. Hopefully we'll have a catch. Y'all have the radio? And then we move out." With that, Kyle and I stood frozen a moment, watching the pair disappear into the fog before turning towards our own destination, and after taking a deep breath, approaching the gates. We could hear the booming carnival music before we reached the front payment booths and turnstiles. Much to our surprise, it seemed no one was present at the time to prevent our unpaid entry. "Lucky for us," Kyle said. "I don't know about you, but I lost my wallet in that storm." Reaching for my own back pocket, I confirmed that it appeared that I had suffered the same fate. So we jumped the turnstiles and began walking through those misty gates into an establishment we had little inkling of what to expect of this dark carnival, out here in this desolate country land. As we made our way through the grands, the signal carnival music seemed the only familiar vibe of what I remembered of bright and shiny experiences with carnivals throughout my youth. For starters, the fog remained so thick we could barely see 10 feet in front of our eyes. The whole grounds appeared wholly abandoned with the exception of ourselves. After much perusing around abandoned tents, twirling mechanical rides with no operators, food trucks with no servers, and so forth, Kyle and I happened upon a beer tent with a sole proprietor at the helm. An old man, so skinny, so scrawny, so aged, he appeared as if he'd fit in well among the corpses of the cemetery. Maybe with the mummies of Egypt or something. Kyle approached first, in all his eagerness, ready to explain our plight. Rather than pausing to listen to him, the man merely grabbed 2 glasses, quickly filled them with a liquid resembling some kind of light beer from the taps, and set them up on the bar. Kyle again pleaded his case, explaining that we had no money to pay for these here drinks, that our ship had nearly been capsized, that we were wholly and utterly lost at sea. But the man merely turned and disappeared into the fog, leaving the drinks where he had set them. Now, normally we might have had misgivings about such a spectacle of a bartender, such a rude and crude treatment of we patrons. However, we drank little water since the first storm, We were damn hungry and damn thirsty, let me tell you what. We both sat down without saying a word, grabbed our glasses, chinked them together before drinking deeply from those tall glasses which had been poured. I remember Kyle shouting, "Oh, that's just about the best glass of beer I ever tasted in my life, boy." To state the obvious, it wasn't long before we had drained our glasses, and it seemed our mysterious bartender appeared based on the sound of empty glasses being set down on his bar, for he quickly refilled the glasses before again retreating just as quickly. Without a solitary word, it was around the time that we'd finished our third glasses that we heard it. It was the sound of a beautiful voice singing with some operatic splendor, echoing through the fog. We both looked around, searching our surroundings for the source of it. "What do you think, Kyle?" I asked him, now feeling actually high in spirits for the first time after downing that third glass on an empty stomach. "You think that's the bearded lady giving us a ballad?" But when I looked over at him, I found his expression firmly frozen into a look of utter surprise. When I followed his gaze, I witnessed a woman, thin, with long blonde hair, wearing a hooded sweatshirt, approaching through the fog from a distance of about 20 yards. She appeared to be singing, was the source of those mesmerizing tones which carried with the winds. When she got close enough to observe us, she ceased her song-making activities and quickly ran towards us. "Well, hey there, strangers." She spoke as if we had met at any normal kind of setting, without a trace of misgivings as to the actual nature of our current circumstances. "Mind if I join you for a drink?" Not at all," Kyle stammered. The ancient barkeep just as quickly appeared, pouring us all another glass before retreating again. It seemed that Kyle, being the first to have spoken, to invite her into our little circle, she had taken a liking to him straight away. She sat on the stool on the other side of him and quickly leaned over straight into him, placing her arm around his waist as she talked with us. "We don't see many boys like y'all around here, city boys." "Oh, we ain't much from the city," I ventured. "We's lost out here. Nearly wrecked our boat in a storm before we wound up here. Where are we anyways? You got any phones or radios nearby?" Nah, she just plumb ignored me as she leaned over and gave Kyle a big wet smooch on the cheek. It was still difficult for me to make out her face, given the intensity of the fog and the fact that she was wearing that dark hoodie pulled low over her forehead. But she did sound cute. That was all I knew. But as a married man with a little girl who was all I could think about at the time, I was secretly, at first, pretty glad she had chosen Kyle to cling on to, taking all the pressure off of me. Before long, as we finished the next couple of glasses, I found her pulling at Kyle's sleeve, trying to get him off the bar stool to which he was currently glued. I grabbed his other arm. "I don't know about this, Kyle," I whispered into his ear such that she couldn't hear me. "Something doesn't seem right." "You crazy?" he nearly yelled back into my face, such that she would certainly sense my reservations. "She's got dang hot as hell. Let's go, bro." "Oh, let's leave the party pooper here," she said to him. "My friend will soon be by to keep him some company. This is a private party anyway." I clenched his bicep hard in my hand now and grunted at him. "Reg is gonna kill us, man. This ain't a joke. We ain't supposed to be messing around." But he merely smiled at me as if he didn't understand the intensity of my verbiage. "I'm a minute man, bro. This won't take long. Just cover me for a minute. That's all I'm asking. Opportunities like this, once in a lifetime. I spent way too long cooped up on that boat with those couple of bros. I'm sick of the old sausage fest. Gotta get my game on, bro. Just cover for me. I promise, just a couple of minutes. As I felt his sleeve slip out of my hands and I watched the two disappear into the fog, I couldn't help but having a sinking feeling in my gut. I slowly sipped on the last beer that had been poured as I waited impatiently on the bar stool, my head swinging wildly from one direction to the next, the fog and the lack of visibility now making me truly paranoid. Particularly what the girl had said about her friend coming for me. It was a potential encounter that at this point I could truly do without. After a while, I sat with an empty glass. The bartender at this point apparently having shoved off, for the night did not reappear. The quiet had really started to get to me. I suddenly got this creeped out feeling that I should have never let Kyle out of my sight. We should have never split up, obviously. It seemed just too freaking obvious to me at this point. I'd been waiting probably 30 minutes and it was about time to meet back up with Reg and Dom. Not to mention, we'd done nothing to find any form of communication that we'd been tasked with procuring during all this time. It was then I jumped off my steel and made off into the fog in the direction I'd seen them disappear. I walked for what seemed like miles, finding the place wholly quiet and deserted, aside from the constant banal droning of the carnival music. That fog, which seemed endless, eventually gave way to a large big-top style tent with red and white stripes, the whole appearance of which was decidedly in disrepair. Massive holes studded the entirety, giving it the appearance and integrity of a used cheesecloth. From without, I could hear some kind of voices emanating inside. I began nearly tiptoeing for some reason as I moved closer, not wanting them to hear me before I could see them, whomever it might have been. As I moved through the entrance, I witnessed a multitude of abandoned bleachers, a center ring where a show apparently once had been, with torn trapeze nets, worn and faded platforms on which circus animals may have once stood, and so forth. The voices themselves, which I had heard, were coming from a curtained-off area on the far side, through which not much could be seen from this perspective, and so I began to move closer. Slowly and quietly I crept up on them, and when I looked beyond those curtains, I saw a sight which even remembering makes me tremble, which I can never unsee, try as I might. There sat Kyle on all fours, all his clothes missing from his body. A massive woman, probably totaling in at a half a ton at a minimum, sat wedged into a great chair. Her body was completely covered with what seemed like human grease and waste. There appeared to be massive sores or injuries of some kind, very deep in their appearance, like third-degree burns studding her entire body. Her legs stretched out, supported by some kind of footstool. Kyle, crouched down at the length of her legs, was licking some kind of brown substance from in between her toes and working his way up the leg. Some kind of black leather harness had been placed around his body, and another woman, more gross looking and much smaller, more haggard than the first, sat opposite the other, holding what could only be described as either a leash or a chain of some kind which attached to that harness. If the sight of this wasn't enough, it was the smell that made me give up my position first, made me actually lurch and then vomit right onto my own shoes. It was the smell of rotting corpses. When I did get a hold of myself, I let out what must have been a blood-curdling scream. As I gathered my wits, I realized both women now stared at me with a shocked expression, but Kyle simply continued with his task, as if he hadn't noticed anything whatsoever. I quickly charged into the room, kicking Kyle squarely in the gut and bowling him over. I grabbed the chain which the woman held and ripped it hard out of her hand, while simultaneously ripping Kyle up off the ground by it. I put my arm around his skinny frame and nearly dragged him out of the room, grabbing his pile of clothes off a nearby chair as I did so. As soon as we'd slipped beyond the curtain, I heard a demonic wail emanating out towards us. Screams, the likes of which pierced the ears, in which I cannot truly describe the quality of. Try as I may for the rest of my life, nothing will suffice to communicate the terror I felt. Kyle went limp as a rag doll. Once I had him out of the tent, about 100 yards clearance of the tent, I swung him beyond the food truck and started the arduous task of getting him dressed as he laid there like a man paralyzed from the neck down. "What in the hell are you pulling, boy?" I shouted at him furiously. That was when he spoke. "You don't know what I've seen. You don't know. You don't know what I've seen. The horror. Oh, the horror. Kill me. Please. Kill me." As you might imagine, I was now growing very concerned as he became animated for the first time, grabbing my collar with full force. "Kill me now, or I won't go with you. I know where we are. I know. It was at that moment that I plain cold cocked him, picked him up, threw him over my shoulder, and hightailed it out of there as fast as I could under that weighty burden. I looked all around in the fog. "Where the hell are you, Reg?" "Shit. Come on down. Where are you guys?" I could see no one as I scanned the tree line and the area surrounding as far as I could see. As I started to move towards the tree line to see if I could call out to the boys to get their asses in gear, I heard the first scream. It was Reg. I couldn't make out what he was saying, but I saw him emerge from the trees running in a full sprint. He let out another howl. I felt Kyle stirring and I could set him down on his feet. He clutched clumsily at my shoulder, but eventually supported himself. It was around then that Reg had reached us, but he hadn't slowed down in the interim. When he got within reach, he grabbed me by my collar and screamed, "Run, run, fool, run." I was nearly torn off my feet as he sped past me, leaving me and Kyle to our own devices. I quickly turned and started dragging Kyle as quickly as I could toward the boat. It was only then that something occurred to me. "Where's Dom?" I screamed after Reg. I couldn't tell if he heard me or not. I thought he must have, but he didn't stop or turn around. As I dragged Kyle onto the docks, I looked back one more time, expecting to see Dom emerging from that tree line in full sprint. But nothing was there. I noticed the carnival barca had vanished as I saw Reg tear down the dock and leap onto the ship. By the time I had dragged Kyle to the end of the dock, Reg already had the anchor up. With a long pole, he'd begun pushing the boat away from the dock and into the currents. "Hold on, man," I cried at the top of my lungs, as I had to nearly throw Kyle over the gap, watching him collapse onto the deck of the boat like a rag doll. The boat had by now floated another 3 or 4 feet away. I knew I'd never make it standing, so I moved back to about 10 feet and did a run and jump in a flyer. As I soared over the waters, it seemed to me that there was something moving down there beneath the surface, something fast and serpent-like. I smashed into the side of the boat, barely grabbing onto the rails as my feet sunk within inches of being submerged in that river. As I pulled myself up, I saw Reg picking Kyle up and setting him in the captain's chair. Reg began pacing back and forth on the deck like a madman as I gazed back at the dock, watching it disappear from view into the fog. Kyle muttered, "We're in the ice of the ocean, 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 the ice of the ocean." Damn it, Kyle. You think we don't know that? What the hell is wrong with you, boy? Reggie cut me down quick. That ain't what he said. He said we in the ice of the ocean. What the hell, Reg? Don't tell me you're gonna start blubbering now, too. Listen, fool. He said we're in the ass of the ocean. You feel me? Like asshole. Yeah, like you, player. Now with that statement, I fell truly and duly silent. I don't know if it was the insult, the astounding phrase he had just uttered, or the sudden feeling that I wasn't privy to some deeper truth that these fellas were on about. But I bit my tongue after that, and so I let Reggie do most of the talking at his leisure. He got real quiet and serious as he spoke. The look he gave me was almost as if he were blaming me for all of this. But he couldn't exactly come right out and say it, because at the end of the day, the feeling just didn't make any sense. No more sense than anything in our current predicament did. Look, man, it's an old sailor's tale. The ass of the ocean. Something they like to talk about in the corner of low-lit barrooms along the coast, late at night, in the witching hour. That sort of thing, you know? Some folks go crazy when you mention it. Like the sheer horror of the words is about to kill them. Others think you're crazy or some kind of conspiracy nut. But there are some old fishermen who just keep their mouths shut when they hear that kind of talk. I seen them before. Yeah, I seen them. Didn't think much of it till now. But I noticed. They keep their mouths shut and they look in the other direction. Like they were averting their eyes so they could avoid something like the memories coming back. And now I know. It's 'cause they think they might have seen something like it before. And maybe they just narrowly escaped. Or maybe they saw something else get bit. And that could have been us, man. That really could have been us sitting in them bar rooms years from now. But it wasn't. Now Kyle might be a little off. You know, real little shit. That kind of hysterical dude, overreacting and stuff. But in this case, after what I seen today, after what happened to Dom, I think he's right, man. We in the ass of the ocean. And we might never get out alive. I sat for what must have been some long time in silence. I couldn't look at Kyle after that. I just kind of stared at Reggie with what must have looked like an insane glare until I could fully process everything being said. Out of nowhere, Kyle began repeating himself in a low mutter. Logical. Topological. Logical. Topological. So just what in the hell does that mean? The ass of the ocean? How? What about the mouth? Look, man, I don't have your answers, Reggie began. Until that guy started babbling a few minutes ago, I hadn't thought about this whole thing in years. But it makes sense. It makes sense. All I can tell you about it is what the smartest dude I know had to say about it. He was some kind of math student who worked part-time on the boat a few summers ago. When he heard the same story that was whispered through them barrooms, he went quiet for a long time. Didn't say shit for weeks. But then one day he came up to us. He said he was pretty sure that shit made sense. Something about this thing called topology that Kyle was just muttering about. Something like a donut and a teacup, even a human body. They're all the same thing in topology. He had a word for it. He called it like a tortoise or a toroids, that's it, something like that. He said there was a certain theory that everything might be one, even like atoms and shit, including the earth, The earth might have been one. And then he got real close to me. I think he was probably the only one who heard that shit, but he said he wasn't really a believer and all. Wasn't a man of God, but for some reason, he'd been thinking real hard about it. He said, what might be in the guts, beyond the ass? He said that might be the gates of hell. Naturally, I thought this guy was full of shit, like he'd gone off his rocker or something, that he'd really gone off the reservation. But nah, man. Now I'm starting to rethink everything. Now listen, we're gonna get out of here. We're gonna make it home, I countered Reggie, mustering up all the positive ethos in my being. But yet, it seemed to fall flat in the face of his hateful glare, which he leveled at me. No greater admixture of disgust and hatred had ever been leveled at a cabin boy in the line of duty before. As the boat continued to drift down the canal, morale on the ship was low and hourly falling lower. Kyle had gone nearly comatose, even ceasing to mutter or respond with his eyes when I dressed. After that little chat we had split. I had gone up to sit in the captain's chair while Reggie had gone below deck. I didn't care to check on him, to be honest, but I could hear him occasionally making those cracking sounds as if he were opening one beer can after the next from he and Dom's stash. It wasn't long before I started hearing the not-so-occasional thump, as if Reggie was down there punching the walls out and breaking stuff. At this point, my imaginationings were sufficient. I didn't have to see the spectacle for myself. The thought of that big dude Reg mistaking my head for a piece of plaster was enough to keep my distance. And that's why it happened that way. Reg was below deck raging. I was drifting off in the captain's seat, watching the infinite row of pine pass me by on that shore. That's when we heard it. But by the time we heard it, it was too late. The singing had started as a whisper in the winds, a bare whisper, barely audible. But it was the sort of thing where as soon as you heard it, as soon as you knew that you had heard it, had the barest certainty and inclination of it, you couldn't unhear it. It grew rapidly in intensity. I recognized the voice before I could turn. It was the girl. The thing from the carnival. When my head had caught up with my intentions, when I spied the area directly behind me, there was Kyle, standing over the bow, atop the rails. He wailed, "I hear you, my love. We was meant to be together." Before I could shout, he was tumbling over the rails like a rag doll, his body more bending over them at odd angles in a straight collapse than a leap with any clearance.
I could hear the sickening crunch of his ribs connecting with the rail as his body flipped end over end into the dark waters below. I witnessed his boat somersaulting through the air. There was a loud splash. Reggie came running onto the deck, dripping in sweat, just in time to witness the waters from below splashing into the empty air in front of us, where Kyle had stood moments ago. We never saw him surface. We never saw him struggle. We never saw Kyle again. As we continued, a thick and seemingly permanent fog had set in all around us, obscuring our view of the shoreline. We kept sailing for what seemed like days that turned into weeks, and then months. Reggie wouldn't look at me. He kept to himself, distant, never saying a word. I knew he'd blame me for Dom and Kyle. You know, I was the new guy, the stranger. In our current situation, he stayed below deck. Mostly drinking, I imagined. I'd occasionally hear him falling into a fit of drunken rage, his screams and cries echoing up from below deck, accompanied by the thumping of torn flesh breaking through cabinets and other wooden objects fastened below. I knew our rations were running low as they possibly could. I couldn't even discuss this with him, however, as it seemed his mind had gone into a deep and desolate suspension. On those rare occasions when I did see him, he stared at me with a blank gaze that I could tell had hatred boiling and seething under it. I thought that if only I could catch him in a sober moment, I could break the ice. I could reason with him that we need to work together to get through this. But I knew he'd long since broken into Dan's liquor reserves, the well-stocked bar beneath deck reserved for his parties. There were dozens of bottles down there, enough to keep Reg liquored up for the better part of 6 months. As the rations continued to diminish, I knew it was only a matter of time before Reggie would finally come to me. But it wouldn't be to talk. My chances against him in a hand-to-hand melee, let me just say, were slim to none. I knew he'd fold me in half, and as he gave me that 1,000-mile stare, his hand often seemed to hover near that 12-inch gutting knife he always wore on his belt. I thought about my daughter more and more, how I had failed her, how I had lost everything for my family, how the future was now but gone. I saw the image of my daughter falling away from me, so far out of reach, in my worst fate imaginable. How I had set out fancying myself some brave adventurer, and how I was now doomed to perish, a piece of excrement in the asshole of the earth. It was several days later that I awoke suddenly from my nap in the captain's chair at the bow of the ship. I had dozed off. The effects of my diet of straight liquor from the bottles I'd snagged from below deck having overwhelmed me. Our rations had depleted entirely 3 days previously. Neither Reg nor I haven't eaten anything or drinking any fresh water since then. As I awoke and beat the sleep off my eyelids, it became quickly apparent that something was amiss. I felt a sharp point of something or other digging into my Adam's apple. When I opened my eyes, there stood the hulking mass of Reg above me. A harpoon gun, which he held in his arms, was pointed directly at my neck. the harpoon actually digging into my flesh. Reg, please, I tried, but then it just fell off, not knowing what I could possibly say in a situation such as this, understanding that this was the end. He leaned down a bit. There was a wild ferocity in his bloodshot eyes, a look of desperate insanity plastered on his face. I saw him, he said merely, before tensing his arms and choking up on the weapon which was now pointed at the softest and inmost parts of me. What? I asked him stupidly, cowardly. I saw him. You don't know. You don't know what we seen in those woods. Those woods. Reg, I'm sorry about Dom and Kyle. Screw Kyle, he said, baring his lips at me, his large teeth visibly gnashing between them. You don't know what we saw in those woods, man. We were on the run. Tell me, how long were you boys waiting at the carnival? I don't know for sure, Reg. Maybe a little over an hour? Exactly. Exactly what I thought you'd say. Me and Dom. We were gone for months. On the run. I saw him. You don't know what I saw. What did you see, Reg? Just tell me already or kill me. One or the other. You see, the situation had grown quite desperate for me at this time. I'd long ago given up hope of ever seeing my family again. And as the rations had depleted to nothing, I'd understood that it was the end on some level. And this was the natural course of organic life. That I could only hope to see something on the other side of this bleak and desolate existence. So when I said those words to Reg, let me tell you, I really meant them. I really despaired of the possibility that he might not end it for the both of us in that moment. That we'd just keep going on like that somehow, in defiance of all logic and reason. Maybe forever. You see, he started up again as if he'd not heard me. You see, we found that little pond, that bounteous pond of Mr. Jekyll. After y'all left, he showed us the way. He sure did. Told us it was the freshest tasting water, the finest fish in the whole area. We were fishing for hours, not coming up with nothing. That lying bastard is what we thought. It's when Dom decided to drink some of the water. That's when it all started. I told him not to. I told that damn fool not to. Told him it didn't look kosher and shit. But you know him. He didn't listen. Bastard never listened. But soon as he stood up, I could see the look on his face. I knew something was wrong. And when he grabbed his stomach, started screaming, that's when I knew we were in for it. When I got to his side, he started puking up all kinds of black mucusy shit with all kinds of stringy shit in it, like worms or something. And that's when it came up out of the water. As it emerged, it was covered with the same black oozy stuff, like some kind of placental covering its body or some stuff. But I wasn't gonna wait around to find out. I grabbed on, and we ran into those woods. We ran and we kept running until we couldn't run no more. You see, it was his stomach. It wouldn't stop hurting him. He said it was the worst pain he ever felt in his life. And my man was no weakling. I didn't know what to do. We camped out that night. We made a fire. The next day we walked all day, as often as we could before we'd have to sit and rest again. And then we did the same thing again the next day, and the next day after that, and the next. It was the fourth day that it had happened, when Don was in one of his fits, rolling around on the ground in pain. He pulled up his shirt, and that's when I saw it. Something under the skin, rolling around and seething in there, in his guts, pressing up its head, stretching the skin and the muscles of his abs. It was the sickest shit I've seen in my whole life. I grabbed my gutting knife. I told him I was gonna cut it out. I was gonna make him all better. But he begged me not to. Said I was gonna kill him. He was probably right. But the fact is, I would have been doing him a favor. He didn't know. He didn't know what was coming for us. But he would. He would know better. Better than all of us. And so we kept going. Day after day. Surviving off berries and squirrels I was catching with deadfall traps. Dom could barely keep anything down the whole time. In his condition, that thing inside of him, it was getting worse every day. Getting bigger. Getting stronger. I didn't want to think about what the end conclusion would be. How that thing was gonna come out eventually. I threw up many times just thinking about it as I watched him scream in excruciating pain. Until I couldn't think about anything anymore. Nothing. My mind went into a complete blank. I think it's been that way ever since, if I'm telling the truth. But finally, after about a month, that's when it finally caught up to us. The thing that had been following us since that pine. It was nighttime. I was sitting by the fire, and Dom had passed out on the opposite side of me as usual, after rolling around in pain for a few hours. I was just dozing off when it happened. Might have even been half asleep at the time. I can barely remember. But the next thing I knew, I heard these slurpy, oozing sounds like something really wet was coming through the brush. When I looked up, there it was, standing over him. And in that instant, it shed that black, oozy covering, as if it knew I was watching it. I hid my eyes immediately, understanding that I might be struck paralyzed with terror if I didn't. And then I heard those slicing sounds, And then the screams. It had ripped him wide open down the middle like an orange peel. Whatever it was inside of Dom, I heard it come out screaming and slimy, like it was a grape being crushed. It oozed out of him. That was when I heard it speak. And that was when I ran. I ran all night long, and I never stopped running until I saw you guys. Now you know. You know who I saw. You know. Who was it, Rich? Who did you see? I saw the fucking devil. I heard what he said, player. He wanted a sacrifice. Somehow, in that moment, I had decided to act. Without fully understanding what I was doing, my body reacted with animal-like intelligence. My arm quickly swung up, and at the same time I leaned my head back into the side, such that I whacked the harpoon away from myself temporarily, freeing my neck from danger. At the same instant, with the other fist I punched Reg hard in the groin. He fell like a sack of potatoes. The harpoon gun went flying backwards, across the deck towards the stern. I could see his massive body working despite the pain. I saw his hand reaching for his gutting knife, and that's when I took off, but not before giving him a swift kick to the teeth with my boot. I ran towards the stern, towards that harpoon gun, but I realized he was fast on his feet and faster upon me. Being far larger and far more athletic than me, we were soon in a hand-to-hand grappling match, which I had wanted to avoid at all costs. He with a large gutting knife in one hand. It wasn't long before the knife went in. Yes, Reg had stabbed me, but I hadn't stopped fighting on that account. In fact, I had turned my body to the side such that he couldn't grab the knife back out of me to use it against me again. The while I held him against the rail with all my might, but it was to no avail. His might and his muscular power was too great, and I was bleeding mightily. I felt the strength sapping from my body second to second. He soon had his hands around my throat, and man, could that boy squeeze. Just as I thought I was about to pass out, there was a loud splashing sound from behind us. That's when his grip loosened. As I struggled to stand and push him off of me, I realized the boat had drifted into a wide circular opening with a current that seemed somehow circuitous, as if it were a whirlpool of sorts, just like the ass of the ocean that we had come in through, except that the water seemed somehow bright and glowing, as if it were on fire. As I slowly turned around, that's when I saw it. That's when I saw, to my great amazement and sheer horror, as it rose from the glowing water beneath, I witnessed the armored shins and thighs gleaming and dripping with droplets of fire. Some deep instinct within me told me not to exchange a gaze above this level. But when I looked over to my side, there was Reg standing full on, perpendicular to the beast, his eyes wide. I witnessed the blood drain from his face as his skin grew completely pale and his eyes turned into white dots like balls of paste.
His skin began to dry and wither. Right in front of my eyes, I saw his eyelids pulling away from his eyes, lips pulling away from his teeth as it morphed into a tissue paper-like covering over his bones. Before I knew it, Reg was collapsing, falling overboard and being consumed by the flames beneath that licked the sides of the boat. I had no time to sit paralyzed, for before I knew what was happening, I witnessed those armored cleats, cap a pie, gliding over the surface of the waters towards the boat. I thought to myself that whatever devil this might be, Ian, the prince of hell, or Satan himself, that I wouldn't let him take me without a fight. I remembered the spear gun, which would be used for catching sperm whale, giant squid, or even shark. I jumped behind the gunner, cranking the spear into position and swinging the pivot around. Through the crosshairs, I saw those shackled shins, the armor. Fiend floated near over the waters, the flames licking his boots as if they were drenched with kerosene. I wrapped my crucifix around the head of the spear, not knowing why, but my finger tensed on the trigger. I pulled it and let loose. My aim was true. It was then that I lost consciousness. Reg's knife still plunged into my side. I lost too much blood. Everything went dark as the beast was upon me. Before everything went black, I heard it scream. When I awoke, I could barely move. It took me some time to begin rolling around in an attempt to stand, but my shirt was decidedly plastered down. It was the pain that I felt first when I opened my eyes. There was Reg's knife in front of me, all covered in blood and gore. My hand instinctively moved to the side of the wound. It was no longer dripping with blood, but it was slimy as hell, and it did smart pretty good. As I was finally able to stand, I found myself on the boat, the ace of the ocean. I was at the docks, not properly anchored, but it had slammed straight into the dock, destroying a good stretch of it, but apparently stopping the boat's forward motion nonetheless. When I could finally stand, I searched the boat high and low for my crewmates, thinking that maybe I could find them. But I was alone. It wasn't just some terrible dream or nightmare. I told myself as I walked along the docks towards my home, it couldn't have been a dream, I thought, my hand holding pressure against the place where the knife had gone in. But I didn't make it far along those docks. Before I knew it, a black mini limousine had pulled up. Two men wearing ski masks had jumped out, had grabbed me, unable to fight back in my weakened condition, and thrown me into the trunk before slamming it shut and taking off. I don't remember much of what happened next. Just that it seemed I was back there a long while, and that I dozed off in the interim, coming in and out of consciousness frequently, hearing different noises and voices and whatnot, but being completely unaware as to what was going on. All I remembered was that I suddenly realized that there was something strange in my pocket. Something crinkly, like a ball of paper, something like that, which I hadn't expected to be there. Before I knew it, I was awoken by a bright light and two men pulling me out of the trunk before
pulling a bag or a hood of some kind over my head. The two men nearly dragged me, since I was barely able to walk, into some kind of building. We went down a bunch of stairs, one level after the next, during which my knees were mostly being banged and slammed onto the stairs. Finally, I felt myself being dragged across a long carpeted stretch of room before being set down into a chair. When the hood was ripped off my head, I found myself greeted by a blinding light overhead. Part of me thought it might have been the gates of heaven I was seeing. But then I came to. My imagination ran wild. I thought I might be in some sort of interrogation room, the likes of which I had seen in many action flicks. When my eyes finally adjusted, I realized that I was seated at some sort of table. I saw that across from me sat a man with a long beard and hair that was cropped short on the sides but longer on top and sort of standing up or spiked up in a way. He appeared to be staring down at his phone at the moment, as if he was oblivious to the bleeding man sitting across from him. When I happened to look down, I noticed that the table I was seated at was a legitimate poker table. It was then I heard myself utter something, without meaning to, as if reflexively. "Dan, is that you?" At this point, the man set his phone down and took a long, hard stare at me, as if he were only now noticing my presence at his table, and perhaps wondering how I'd come to be in such a position, seated across from him. But after a moment, which to me felt like an eternity, he did speak. "So, you boys really thought you could steal from me?" What? I was able to mutter back at him. "Where are the others?" he said, his voice growing in intensity. "My men have already searched the boat, and those boys are gone. No gold, no silver, no gems, no cold, hard cash, nothing." Excuse me, sir," I said, genuinely seeking an understanding. "I think this is all a big misunderstanding. We never found any buried treasure." "No, you excuse me." He cut me off cold. "There was never any buried treasure, you idiot. This was a prearranged drop-off and pickup. An exercise in money laundering, not some archaeological dig. Comprende? Nothing. And I mean no task could have been simpler. But you numbskulls had to screw it up. According to my GPS, the drop-off took place an hour before you idiots sailed over the same coordinates. And then y'all just vanished into thin air. I know it was Reggie. He found my GPS, that guy. He is clever. He clipped it. And y'all tried to do a runner with my cash in my fishing boat. All of which is worth more than all of y'all lives put together." "Dan, you gotta listen to me. We wasn't double-crossing you. Something happened to us out there. Something terrible. Something I will never be able to explain. The horror. Oh, the horror." "Save it. Give me one reason to trust you, boy. All your pals are missing, and so is the cash. So is the gold, so are the gems. Y'all really have fucked me here. More than you could possibly know. There's some really dangerous people who are looking for me now. Really pissed, thinking I had something to do with arranging this fiasco. For 30 million to go missing. You can't give me a location as to where all them boys are holed up with my loot. You're dead, boy. You're dead." At this point, he raised his arm from beneath the card table and pointed a Desert Eagle pistol straight at my forehead. On seeing it, I knew it would blow the back of my skull clean off like a champagne bottle being popped. I knew I had to act swiftly, to find the words that would somehow convince this wild beast of what had truly happened out there. At the same time, I realized the impossibility of my task, and I prayed to God himself to save me, as he had done earlier. To put it simply, 30 million had gone missing, and someone would definitely have to pay for that. And after all I had been through, after all I had survived in the ass of the ocean, that person who had to pay, it seemed, that person who had to pay with their life, well, that was gonna be me. I began to resign myself to the same fate that Dom, Kyle, and Reg had met. I was simply the last fool in a long line of suffering to meet their ends at a dastardly and gruesome fate. I was the one stupid enough to have prolonged his suffering this long. I began to think of my daughter at that time, of those wet and shiny, sparkling eyes, full of all the energy and promise of youth, all the hopes and ambitions that had gone unfulfilled in my life, which she was supposed to fulfill. And I thought of my wife, everything I was leaving behind, everything I'd be losing. My daughter would have to grow up without a father. My wife would have to find a new man to take care of her and the baby, or else, if she couldn't bring herself to it, would have to struggle on by her own efforts, alone with a helpless infant on her tip. I felt the stream of tears begin to roll down my face, the stream of self-pity. I couldn't help it. I knew that within a few moments I'd be on the verge of pissing myself. I could somehow feel my bladder actually loosening up. But before any of that happened, something within me suddenly clicked, like some deeply buried survival instinct. The same ugly head that had reared during my mortal struggle against Reg. And I found myself suddenly moving before I knew what I was up to. I grabbed the deck of cards off the table with one hand. I saw the gun twitch as I did so, as if Dan's finger were about to slip onto the trigger. My only saving grace was that his hand was steadier than I would give him credit for at that moment, I did silently urinate upon myself. As much as I hate to admit it, I did. But no shots were fired in that moment. "What the hell you doing, boy? This ain't no game," he said to me. "Well, maybe it is," I said. "You're a gambler, Dan, ain't you? Well, I got a proposition for you. If you win the game..." As I spoke, I drew a pile of poker chips towards myself with my other hand. "If you win the game, you can kill me, straight up. And I'll even tell you where the other guys are at before you do. It's a win-win. But if I win the game, you gotta let me go." "I'll still tell you where the other guys are at, but you can't kill me. Understand? I got a little girl to go back home to, and I promise you'll never hear from me again. And you get your loot back. But that's on you. Those are my conditions." He sat for a long time, still pointing the pistol straight between my two eyes. But then, to my great and consummate surprise, his arm slowly lowered, like an erection going flaccid, and he set the gun right down on the card table. You only just met me today, but you know me too well. Yeah, I'm a gambler, alright, and I like those odds. We'll do it your way. Texas Hold'em is the game. For the first time, I saw an intrigued smile spreading across his face, as if he'd found a new respect for his adversary. And I returned that smile, which I think caught him a little unawares. And I said, "Sure. I can't thank you enough for the opportunity. Only, the game is a different one than you're used to, my friend. Let's play 52 pickup." I cocked my hand back as hard as I could and whipped the hold deck straight into his face. The deck of cards sailed through the air as if it were a solid object. To me, the greatest knuckleball ever to be thrown. It smashed straight into his nose, whereupon cards and drops of blood scattered in every direction. Before he could reach for his gun, I sent a volley of poker chips likewise in the direction of his head, whereupon this time he saw it coming and ducked. I took my opportunity and flipped the poker table, sending the pistol scattering across the floor at least a good 20 feet away from his defensive position. In that moment, as I watched him dive into the corner after the gun, I knew my options were limited, to say the least. I could make a run for the door, but it was pretty far, and he might get the gun trained on me first, or I could make a run at him, probably the riskiest but highest reward outcome, especially if I could take him out clean. But finally, for some unknown reason, I simply reached into my pocket where I had felt the presence of something strange before. My hand emerged with a crumpled sheet of paper, which I quickly unfolded as I ducked down behind the overturned poker table. I saw a series of letters which spelled out words I had never seen before, words in some other language that only years later I can guess must have been Latin. As I heard the first volley of gunfire, something within me said to read those words on the paper out loud. And I did. As I began to shout my best pronunciation of these alien words, everything seemed to go quiet. A moment later, I heard a deathly, horrifying scream from behind me. As I stood up, I saw Dan, only he wasn't his usual self anymore. He looked just as shriveled and dried up as Reg had, and moments later, his entire body burst into a gigantic ball of flame. As he collapsed to the ground, I could see the flames licking the drop ceiling tiles and causing them in turn to burst into flame. I ran out of there as fast as I could. I jumped out a back window on the ground level to avoid running into his goons should I try the main entrance. When I finally found myself on street level, I walked for a long time in that strange neighborhood, not fully understanding where I was located. And all that time I struggled to comprehend what had just happened to me over the course of the past few months. I wondered if my family had given up hope of my return. Had there been a statewide search for me? Or had the authorities convinced my wife that I'd plumb run off with another man's boat for reasons unknown to parts unknown? As I wandered through the night for hours, I somehow found myself back at that familiar scene on the docks. As I stared at the boat, the words rung in my ears. It was a prearranged drop-off. 30 million. Gold, silver,
gems, cash. And somehow, despite my knowledge of only rudimentary navigation, the coordinates that Reg had uttered weeks ago had stuck in my head. I finally put together the courage to step back onto that boat, and that night, I sailed the waters alone, with no other thought in my head than returning to that little girl, with all the riches of Solomon. And that's where you find me today, sitting on this here porch in the cold of this Alaskan night, with nothing but a hot toddy to keep me warm. I started my oil drilling company with that sunken treasure money, and I found that success I'd always dreamed of. Despite my hillbilly bumpkin ways, me and the wife, let's just say we didn't last. But that little girl, she still visits me every month. I put her through school, and I taught her the hard-working ways of our bloodline. And she runs the family business now. And to this day, she is all I've been able to live for. After what I went through, after what I saw in the ass of the ocean, she's all that's kept me from sticking the barrel of this here shotgun into my mouth and pulling the trigger. And let me tell you something, a word to the wise, so to speak. If anyone ever tries to hurt my little angel, if anyone ever tries to touch so much as a hair on her head, the head of my baby, my reason for living, if anyone so much as looks into those wet, sparkling, and shiny eyes in the wrong kind of way, well, let's just say I still got that little piece of paper with those strange and old, terribly old words. That piece of toilet paper that followed me out of the ass of the ocean. Right here in my pocket. I take it with me everywhere I go.